Tuesday's edition of lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream, as we are with you 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, and streaming with all of our shows archived, available to watch on demand at lcpioneers.com. Just click on the fan zone. You can see the shows there, as well as go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/lcpios, keeping you connected with student athletes, coaches, alumni, and members from throughout the Lewis and Clark College community. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Goff. I am the play-by-play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark, the Pioneers out of Portland, Oregon, and members of NCAA Division III, nationwide, over 430 institutions at the NCAA Division III level. So our student athletes an opportunity to compete on a national scale as a member of the Northwest Conference. 9 teams from throughout Northwest Oregon and the state of Washington, and competing at Lewis and Clark across 19 intercollegiate athletic programs. Excited to have Qwynci Bowman on the show today, a sophomore from women's golf. We'll talk to Qwynci not only about the fall 2020 semester, which is winding down as we speak. In fact, I think Qwynci told me tomorrow there's another final for her. So we'll talk about what the semester looked like from an academic perspective, but also looking at it from a golf perspective too. Golf was one of the more difficult sports this fall to figure out how to work in a pandemic. And so we'll get that firsthand experience from Qwynci, who's a sophomore on the golf program. Invite you to get involved with the show. You can by connecting with us in our Facebook Live comments. You can always email us as well, sports@lclark.edu, whether you have a question for our guest in this program or a suggestion for a future guest. And you can also contact us via Twitter and Instagram. Our handle on both of those platforms is LC Pioneers on each. I do want to pass along a statement because just recently, Lewis and Clark and Willamette made an announcement. This is an update regarding the plan for 2021. Right now, entering the weekend, we were expecting all fall and early winter athletics competition to be suspended through at least January 1st, 2021. Then yesterday, Willamette and Lewis and Clark making the following statement: in consideration of restrictions in the state of Oregon and the health and safety of our student athletes and wider campus and local communities, Lewis and Clark and Willamette announce with regret the cancellation of their football and men's and women's basketball seasons for 2020-21. We understand this news is disappointing to our students and campus communities. State restrictions on competition are unlikely to change, as football and basketball are considered high-risk sports by the NCAA, and the experiences of some colleges and universities have shown this to be true, even with strong safety protocols in place. This difficult decision was made after discussions with our Northwest Conference colleagues. We will continue to work with the Oregon Health Authority and the Northwest Conference to develop plans to return, if possible, to safe competition in lesser risk sports. For those student athletes not competing this spring, we will continue to find meaningful ways for them to engage in athletic and physical activities. That announcement right on the front page of lcpioneers.com. You can read it a little bit more in depth. We invite you to do so. And of course, as I mentioned, with all of our past shows, please check out youtube.com/lcpios for the latest information regarding this show, including watching past episodes. And then specific to COVID-19, of course, any other updates, including that recent statement that I just read, available to find on our website, lcpioneers.com/COVID. So let's get on with our program today and welcome in our guest, a sophomore for Lewis and Clark Women's Golf. Excited to welcome Qwynci Bowman to the show. And Qwynci, I appreciate you letting me track you down. I know it's finals week. You got a whole bunch of stuff going on toward the end of your semester. And that's a great starting place, is to talk about the semester. Just kind of give us an idea how you're doing as you've gone from, the last week of August now to the middle of December with fall 2020.
Yeah, so I honestly had very high hopes for the way that this semester would look. I was living on campus, and I'm not going to lie to you, it was very different. Campus life was not at all the same as it once was. Even for me as a leader in college outdoors, that was completely different. We weren't able to do trips outside of the Lewis and Clark bubble, which was really unfortunate. So every aspect of college life really changed.
Yeah, I mean, clearly no one anticipated when selecting a college and what the plan was that we would have a pandemic. I mean, I've even joked about the ability to have a yard during the pandemic has been great for me, but I never considered that when buying a house. I told my wife we didn't need a yard, right? It's kind of crazy to think about in hindsight. But that said, what was the experience like for the fall? Kind of give us details on what you chose to do academically, and then also get into some of the golf aspects too.
Academically, I don't know. I mean, all of my classes were online, even though they were hybrid. So I didn't really get to have that in-person experience. Um, Zoom classes, Zoom University, as people say, just wasn't great. It was a struggle to keep up with classes and keep up with um, just making sure that you're learning the material and it's actually sinking in when you're not physically there and physically responsible for paying attention. And golf changed dramatically. We weren't able to have a season, unfortunately. And it wasn't until about the middle of the year that we were actually able to go out and practice outside of Lewis and Clark. And that was just once a week on the weekends. We would play a course in Oregon, which was really nice to get outside of the Lewis and Clark bubble. Yeah.
Well, and I think that that is an aspect that, as a team, trying to figure out and navigate what the fall was going to look like. Coach Yen, your teammates, and just trying to make the best of a sometimes, ever changing situation, right? I imagine you weren't knowing from day to day necessarily what was possible. How did your team kind of rally around each other? What kind of, cohesion was there, kind of being subjected to the same exact circumstances?
Hmm. I think we all just really, like you said, rallied around each other. We started going to more lifts together, which personally I did go to lift last year, but this is the first time that I actually went to lift with my teammates. We actually spent more time together going to, you know, each other's apartments. And yeah, we got a lot of team bonding out of it.
Well, I like to get the origin story. Qwynci Bowman joining us on lcpioneers.com live, a sophomore for women's golf at Lewis and Clark. You're from Kyle, Texas, so give us the origin story. What brought you to Lewis and Clark?
Kyle, Texas is a very interesting place. It's about 20 minutes outside of Austin. Um, so you have a little bit of the southern feel, cows roaming around, but you also have the city really close. And for me, I've always really liked the city, and I consider myself an environmentalist, so I knew that whatever school that I went to would have to, prioritize the environment and sustainability. And in doing that, I found Lewis and Clark, and I just loved everything about it when I toured it, and it just felt like the perfect place for me. And it really is.
Environmental studies is one of my favorite majors because I see so much success coming from Lewis and Clark in terms of, personal fulfillment from students who pursue that degree, and clearly the impact that environmental studies majors have on other places and other people. What was it about that major that made you choose to pursue environmental studies?
Um, Whenever I first toured Lewis and Clark, I had an idea in my head of what I wanted to do when I got older, and that was to be a humanitarian engineer. And I remember going, but it hadn't really been a thing yet, and it's still not really a thing. And I knew that I wanted to kind of my studies. I wanted to have them geared towards this humanitarian engineering idea. And there was a academic fair at Lewis and Clark for the environmental studies program, and I walked up to Liz Saffron, one of the environmental studies professors, and I told her, I was like, this is all I want to do. I just want to be a humanitarian engineer, and I just want to help people, and this is like a little bit more about it. And she was like, just completely right off the bat was like, oh, no problem. We can do that for you. Like, that's easy. Whatever you want to do, we can make it happen. And that's when I realized that environmental studies was major for me.
That's a really neat story and an opportunity to pursue something that was close to your heart in terms of you talking about the environment as being part of you. And I assume, has golf always been that way too? Was golf something that you started younger, or did you start it later? What was it your path in terms of becoming a collegiate golfer?
Um, Golf is definitely something that I've had with me ever since probably about fifth grade. I remember I had little pink golf clubs with my name engraved on them, and me and my dad would go and hit balls um, at the range. And yeah, it's just always something that I've been able to do with my dad. Um, Play golf ever since I was really young.
What is it about the game that you enjoy most?
Hmm. I think even though it's my biggest weakness, consistency is something that I really like about golf. If you're not practicing, then you're not getting better. And it's just, and I think that some people would argue that that's everything, but with golf, it's a crucial piece of the game. because consistency is so important. Like play, you could stop playing for 2 weeks and completely lose all feel for the ball, and completely lose all feel for your clubs, and you might not even, you could be a completely different golfer. And I think that's really interesting because it shows that in order to play golf, you have to be extremely connected to the sport and to yourself and to the objects that help you play the sport. And I think that's really interesting.
Now, I'm going to make an assumption from a weather standpoint. In Texas, I imagine there's less rain when you're out golfing than in the Northwest. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm curious, what's the adjustment that has to be made when you start playing golf in the Northwest?
Rain is definitely a huge factor. Rain, mud, the cold. Yeah, Texas is one. It's right now. It's probably about 85 degrees, and it's just I could play golf this morning and have absolutely no rain, and that's a big difference. But I've actually loved playing golf in the rain, which is a very unpopular opinion.
Yeah, well, and I can kind of share that, not necessarily from the golf standpoint, but I will tell you that when I tell people I love 65 and cloudy or 65 and rainy, they'll look at me kind of like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Absolutely. This is like the best place for me because it doesn't get too hot and it doesn't snow, so I can kind of live in the in between." Our guest is Qwynci Bowman joining us on lcpioneers.com live. You can watch us Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live and available on demand at lcpioneers.com. Now, I talked about this last week. Blake Tellinghusen from baseball and you were selected among the student athletes for 7 students at Lewis and Clark earning induction into the Pamplin Society of Fellows. Describe what that means to you and give us some insight, please, on the process to be becoming named a Pamplin Scholar.
So I'll work backwards. The process of becoming a Pamplin Scholar is you have to be selected by, you have to be selected to apply by a previous professor that you had your freshman year. So for me, that was Mary Shebus, who is a English professor, and she selected me to apply. And then I got an email in the summer that was giving me the application process, and that was essentially to write an essay. And then from that essay, all the applicants were determined, and then about 15 to 20 were chosen for an interview from the essay pool. And from that interview, 7 people were selected.
And so what does it mean for you to be selected?
I think it's one of it's the biggest honor at Lewis and Clark that any student can get. And I think for me that just shows it's the honor is everything, because I think for me, especially recently with COVID and going on Zoom and stuff, it kind of makes you feel like you're out of place in a way. And for me, when I go, one of the perks is of being in the Pamplin Society is you have a special room in the library. And for me, especially this past semester, just going into that room for me kind of like grounded me and like reassured me that I deserve to be here and that I can handle anything that is thrown at me.
Well, I certainly appreciate giving us some insight because that was not something that I realized was the process by which one becomes a Pamplin Scholar. But that is the truth, is the highest honor bestowed to students by the college, and only 7 second-year students are selected each year. So I just want to extend a big congratulations to you on that induction. And so have you been able to do much within the Pamplin Society membership, or has the pandemic kind of shaken things where you're not able to do anything formal per se?
Yeah, just like with everything this semester, we weren't able to do a lot of the things that they usually do, like the fall retreat, for example. That was over Zoom, and that was over the course of one day rather than a weekend in a remote area of Oregon. And however, we still were able to do dinners and the retreat over Zoom, which was really nice because we were still able to see everyone and get to know people and get to know the Pamplin professors and faculty.
Well, and I'm very grateful to you. For those watching, we have about 10 minutes or so to make sure all the tech's working before the show and ask about topics. And you brought up college outdoors, which I hadn't even thought to ask you, but I remember seeing your picture on some of the college outdoors Instagram, and I know you've been involved. So I'm happy you brought that up. What is it about college outdoors that made you want to get involved? And what are some of the roles or experiences you've had so far?
I think for me in Texas, you don't get a lot of the same flora and fauna as you do in the PNW. And I was just, whenever I first arrived at Lewis and Clark, I knew that I wanted to be a part of something outdoorsy. I previously worked on a farm, so the environment, as I mentioned, was really important to me. And so I did an NST through College Outdoors, and that just completely opened my mind. It was stand up paddleboarding the coast, and I met so many amazing people, so many amazing leaders, and I got to see so many beautiful things on the coast. And I just remember saying, I want to do this every weekend. And that's what College Outdoors is. You can do those types of trips every weekend, and um, you can be a leader, which I've had a really lucky opportunity this past semester, even with COVID and everything. I've been able to lead, I think this past semester I led 4 or 5 different trips in Trans Creek and Riverview Natural Area.
Yeah, I've spoken to some of the leadership over there at College Outdoors, and kudos to you and everyone involved, because the amount of stuff that you were able to adapt to because of the circumstances to provide experiences for our students. Kudos to you, and I give you a lot of credit for that, because that couldn't have been easy. What were some of the challenges, I suppose, that you ran into because you aren't able to actually go outside? I mean, you're doing this virtually, right?
Oh no, 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 no. We were able to go to Tryon Creek and Riverview Natural Area. That's right behind Lewis and Clark. We were able to actually go with groups and walk into the forests and do stuff like that.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, well, that makes a lot more sense, because I remember there were virtual new student trips, but I do also remember being told that you were able to lead all those trips in the circumstances. I heard that they went off really safely. So well done for College Outdoors. Kudos to y'all. Let's close with this, Qwynci. You mentioned to me that you were pursuing the 3-3 law program. What is that program?
So the 3-3 Law Program is a joint program offered between the undergraduate school and the Lewis and Clark Law School, and essentially you try and condense your 4 years at Lewis and Clark into 3, and then in your 4th year you start taking classes at the law school towards your Juris Doctorate degree, which is like your degree that you get when you become a lawyer. And yeah, it's just condensing the whole process of going to law school. So I'll have to take my LSATs um, next spring, which is earlier than most, and I'll have to apply to law school next fall. So everything is compacted, and it's a quicker process. So you can graduate a year earlier than other lawyers.
Are you pursuing environmental law?
I am, yes.
What is it about the prospects of that program that excites you?
Um, I think that, especially this past semester, I took a class called environmental law, and you kind of realize that law is a really great way to make change and to kind of get at the doorstep of people that are in power, and encouraging them to look at statutes and etc. that will protect species and endangered habitats and stuff like that. And that's what interests me, is and more geared towards natural resources and endangered species.
Well, we appreciate your time. Like I mentioned at the top, it is finals week. I think I can already start to tell, even with myself, that the end of the year is approaching, and I'm getting a little fatigued myself. So you, as a collegiate student, I give you a ton of credit for persevering through everything, and certainly thankful that you took some time to join us today on the show. Qwynci Bowman, thank you so much for joining us on lcpioneers.com live.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That was a fun conversation, and I really appreciate her clarifying the college outdoors thing, because we just had a roundtable through Student Life with College Outdoors. And again, I can't credit that staff enough, and with Qwynci too as a student leader. And I remember them saying specifically that they were able to do those on-site trips, and for some reason I was thinking it was much virtual, like some of the new student trips this year. But she referenced NST, which is a new student trip, and College Outdoors has done those, and it has been very impactful, according to what I hear from College Outdoors, in terms of the way that it affects students, to have long-term friendships at Lewis and Clark and get really a firsthand experience in the Pacific Northwest, especially because Lewis and Clark gets so many students from across the country. And Qwynci talked about it, being from Texas, she wanted to get out into the Pacific Northwest and explore. And yeah, definitely check out their Instagram, the College Outdoors program, because there's some really amazing shots, and they're especially on the Instagram platform. Super fun to share. So a big thanks to Qwynci for joining us. Congratulations on the Pamplin Society, certainly. And also excited that we had someone who could talk about that 3-3 law program, because there are a lot of those programs now that Lewis and Clark has either added, or even like things like an engineering program with partnerships at universities like the University of Southern California. Those programs have been in place, and until you have a chance to meet somebody who might have gone through one, you don't get that firsthand experience. So I'm very grateful to have Qwynci on the show today. Coming up tomorrow, we'll talk to first-year women's rower Sophia Stringer, and then head coach of women's soccer Jim Tersey set to join us on Thursday. And we'll close out our last live show of 2020 with the director of the Bates Center for Entrepreneurship and Leadership, Brian Detweiler Bedell, because Winterim is coming up in January. It is a 1-week thing that happens from the Bates Center over the course of winter break, and we have played a commercial that talks about experiences that our students have had from the Bates Center, and Brian will have a chance to give us an update on everything that is going on in the Bates Center, including Winterim. We'll have that coming up on Friday. So big thanks again to Qwynci Bowman for joining us. Big thanks to you for watching. We are on Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live. You can find all of our past shows on our YouTube page, youtube.com/LCPios, and go to lcpioneers.com, click on the fan zone. They are there as well. And last but not least, updates specific to Lewis and Clark athletics, updates available at lcpioneers.com/COVID. So if you have any questions about what's going on with athletics, be sure to go to that website. Again, an announcement posted yesterday regarding high-risk athletics. We talked about that at the top of the show. We will bring that up over the course of the week as well. I'm Ryan Goff. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, for more of lcpioneers.com live. And until then, goodbye, everybody.
My favorite spot on campus is like right outside the Dovecote, little benches, and there's flowers growing there, and you can get a little coffee at the Dovecote and sit there.
My favorite spot on campus is definitely the weight room. I get that everybody loves like the gardens or the manor house, but our facilities for athletics here are actually amazing too, and the weight room is definitely my favorite spot.
My favorite spot on campus would either be the glade outside of the athletic facilities or South Campus.
What is my favorite spot on campus? I really like the back porch of the manor house. It looks out on Mount Hood, and on a clear day, it's super beautiful just to sit around with friends.
I'm Casey Jones, and I teach a range of classes: general chemistry, organic chemistry, and also some advanced classes. And I have a research lab that currently I have 4 students working with me as part of the Rogers program. The summer experience is a way to get really deeply involved in the science that is here and be able to start to define what might be what you want to do next. So the brown bag gives our students a chance to explain their research and really show the context and the application of what they're doing to a very broad range of students and faculty.
It's interesting to be able to communicate to other scientists what your work is, and it forces you to learn how to talk about your subject so that not only experts in your field can understand it, but others can understand it as well, which I just believe is a good life skill.
To talk about your research in a way that anybody can understand it really is a valuable experience, and it's something that you don't get a lot of practice for except in these contexts. Because oftentimes you're giving a presentation to a classroom filled with people who know basically the same things that you do, but in a brown bag, you have to be able to explain and provide motivation for everything that you're working on and why it's important and why it's relevant to be studying.